Good evening, everyone, and I wanted to welcome you to a very exciting session here. We have Dr. BJ Hardick and Dr. Justine Blainey Wells here from the Justine Blainey Wellness Center. We are going to be doing an interview. We're going to be talking about the history of chiropractic and really what it's like being a chiropractic family over the generations, growing up in the through a chiropractic family, but also what it really means. So please help me welcome both Dr. Justine and Dr. Hardick.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back. I've got a special friend with me, Dr. BJ. I've known him for over 25 years. Certainly love his family. His family has been motivating to my family, a leader in the community, fabulous speaker, and just love being in Dr. BJ's presence because I know he is authentic. He is the man who, talks the talk but walks the walk. And I'm just going to give you an example. When he goes to a restaurant, he makes sure that he knows there's no vegetable oil, there's no canola oil. He's the person who's going to make sure he knows that it's wild fish and not farm fish. And whenever BJ orders, I order too, because I know he has, the strength, the power to make sure that he's going to do what's the truly healthy for him and his family, not the easy road. And so I am so happy and so proud that you're with me today. We've been trying to organize this for several months. So this is exciting to me. And BJ, one of the things I really just want to learn about is like, how did your family, your dad, how did your family get involved in chiropractic so many years ago?
Initially my father went to the chiropractor for what he thought was a problem with his feet.
No way.
And of course, he went to the chiropractor at a young age, presenting, like many patients do, with one problem, but a few other health issues that showed up on the health questionnaire. And one of those was that he had a lazy eye and was a cross-eyed kid. In fact, he had been scheduled for surgery several times, but the doctors at the time couldn't really figure out what was the cause of this crooked eye. But back then there was a consideration that physicians would actually go in and cut the muscles that were hypertonic that were causing his eye to cross inwards. But sure enough, when they would get to the actual pre-surgical consultation, he didn't always have the same presentation, so they would cancel the surgery. And in fact, they canceled it several times. So sure enough, when he was going to the chiropractor as a young child with this foot issue, the chiropractor simply asked my grandfather, "Do you mind if I check Clifford's upper cervical spine?" And sure enough, my dad had those early adjustments. And all he really remembers from those days, because those were days when there were no podcasts like this, there wasn't the greatest level of communication with any patients, but definitely not your 11-year-old patients. All I know is that from that day forward, my father never had a crooked eye. In fact, if you look back at old pictures of him, you see a cross-eyed child. In fact, we keep one of those at the front of our office. And then it was only once he was actually considering a career that he went back to the doctor and discovered that it was indeed the upper cervical adjustments that changed his crooked eye presentation. But we show that picture in our office to every new patient because it's at the front at a bit of a 50-year tribute that we have to my father. We show his picture with the crooked eye, and then of course we show his picture going into clinic at Logan. And we explain to all patients that many patients go to the chiropractor with one thing that causes them to search us out, right? That initiates the first appointment. But most people have other things going on that they do not realize are directly connected to the central nervous system and may respond very well once the body is in a better state of harmony, once the body is well adjusted. So we actually show that picture to every new patient to say, listen, don't rule out what the possibilities are. Never underestimate the power of the body to heal itself, even if it's something that you don't think has anything to do with your spine. So that's what got into chiropractic. And of course, my father went to Logan. That's where he met my mom in St. Louis. They thought about going out west. They thought about going to a few different places. But sure enough, home is where the heart is. So they came to where family was. And that's how we ended up in London, Ontario.
Nice. And you're a single child, right?
Yes.
Yes. So, that means all the attention's on you in a chiropractic family. What's it like to be a chiro kid? And the reason why I bring this up is because, my kids are chiro, kids. And now my daughter's in chiropractic college at Life West, just a year to go almost. So what was it like for you, and how was that different than, say, some of your friends?
I want to be transparent with you on this because, realistically, even though I was a chiropractic kid and we lived very differently and we didn't take drugs and we didn't rely upon the conventional medical practices of the day, at the same time, the person that I called my family doctor lived next door. Okay. So, I think some people think, oh, did you even have family? Yes, we had a family doctor, but we saw that doctor at intervals that were very few and far between. We always lived a lifestyle that was that you would practice all things chiropractic first. And of course, throughout the years, we discovered that was all things natural health, all things max living, all those things that you and I would have shared throughout these many, 25 years we've been together. But we would practice all things chiropractic first, and then it would be a consideration of drugs second. Then it would be a consideration of surgery last. That was always our own personal philosophy. I just know that growing up as a kid, I was always, kind of shocked that kids would stay home from school for what I consider to be the smallest little ailment that would seem to never get better. And I just knew that if I was run down, if I wasn't performing well, if I needed to do better in karate or whatever it was, I just knew that as a baseline of my health, I needed to keep my spine in the right alignment. I even remember just and it's kind of interesting, years later, the book, Align Your Health. That word align and alignment, I remember always, even growing up, even in my college years at Queens, I remember thinking about the importance of keeping in alignment with universal principles, the alignment of your body, the alignment of a mindset with others with whom you align, all these things. So really, it was really that overriding philosophy, right, that we grew up with. For me, it was certainly the health practices. But back in those days, we actually weren't natural health aficionados or anything like this. I mean, my mom actually, used to brag that she didn't cook, and I ate at the mall. And even when I got into practice, I really wasn't, all that dialed in with nutrition and fitness and these other elements. So of course, those things came along, right?
Yeah.
But it was the foundation that we needed to be in alignment physically in order for our body to function as best as it possibly could. And I've never known anything else. So even to this day, I think some of my patients are surprised that, yes, I had a family doctor growing up as a kid, right? But the purpose of my chiropractic care, or one of the purposes, was to ensure that I would have to see that family doctor as little as possible. We take care of a nurse who comes in, and of course she works in mainstream medicine. Actually, I'm sure you do too. We have a lot of people that come into the office that work within conventional healthcare. I have friends that work in conventional healthcare. But this one nurse, Nikki, we were out to dinner with her not too long ago, and she said, the way I see it is I go to the chiropractor and I take my kids to the chiropractor to promote their health. She said, I have my doctor in case I have some type of medical concern, or she even used the word emergency, right? And that's how I've always seen the two.
Awesome. And I know I heard stories of you at Dynamic Essentials DE seminars, crawling around as a kid, and that's what my kids did, crawling under the table and listening to Dr. Sid, and just the opportunity to be at seminars with our parents, so that it sinks in as all the kids are at our chiropractic seminars. And just the opportunity to be around other like-minded people, which certainly makes a difference. And I also heard that you worked at the front desk, similar to my kids, helping at your dad's practice.
Yes, I did. How old were your kids when I think you would get your kids working earlier than my dad got me working, though.
I think my kids started working around 15.
Okay,
15. Yeah. Yeah, they actually they used to hand out flyers or stand at wellness booths before working the front desk.
I'm sure before you had them on the books, you had some volunteers going on.
Exactly.
So actually, what's interesting, and I think back to this, when I wanted a job after school, my father simply gave me the opportunity to come down to the office one day a week. It was on Wednesday afternoons. I would finish up grade 9 at the time, come down and work at the front desk. Back then we worked some pretty long hours, but I would be there for a 4 to 5 hour shift in the evening. And I will emphasize that I really had no intention of becoming a chiropractor. I was just having the opportunity to earn some money after school. And I never was forced, right? And I actually, chiropractic is not about force. Chiropractic is about expression, right? Chiropractic is about discovery. I was never forced. In fact, many patients said, oh, you must be learning the ropes, or you must be on your way to school. And for a good year, I frankly told people that I wasn't interested in chiropractic. It was seeing people's lives transformed in so many ways that I realized that that was the environment that I would wish to spend my entire life in. And that's really what motivated me. So certainly I think for anybody else who's listening to this and they want to raise their kids in a chiropractically conducive lifestyle, we need to always be in alignment with the principles. And then certainly let us all explore, and that's again, that's much like, again, uh, even with our nutrition, we weren't perfect as kids whatsoever, right? But we had the principle that we always understood that the body is self-healing, self-regulating. The body is designed to heal itself. One of the reasons, Justine, why I actually got into the whole field of detox in about, I guess it would now be about 15 years ago, is that principle and the philosophy of removing interference, right? That made sense because it was the chiropractic foundation. Certainly when we started eating better and I started looking at labels, it just made sense that I wouldn't want areas of interference because that was always my founding principle. It's really, really quite amazing too, because I know that you and I and your family and my family, sometimes we can even be a little intimidating with our health practices and people think, well, I can't ever do that. And then I remind people that it actually took a long time. It was about getting the principle first. And for many of my patients, I'll see the same thing. I mean, I'll have patients give a testimonial often at 3-4 months, talk about coming off of medications related to cardiovascular disease. And I think, well, you're doing the nutrition plan. And they're not. They just started getting adjusted, right? Yeah. But we still want to advocate for those practices because we know that that's going to allow for better alignment and less interference in the nervous system long term. So it's the big picture.
Absolutely. And I grew up being addicted to Diet Coke. And so, it took a good strong will to get off the Diet Coke because I was told that was healthier than regular pop, and now we just don't have Coke at all or a soda at all. I've listened to so many amazing talks. Both you and your dad are just phenomenal speakers and motivational. But one of the talks you did was about how chiropractic was founded, who the developers are of chiropractic. Can you share some of the chiropractic history as you've studied it?
Absolutely. And I would want to put this in the context of primarily, I know this recording is primarily for members of your community, your patients. Chiropractic was established by D.D. Palmer, who is in recorded history the founding chiropractor, right? Who was a magnetic healer. And I always tell my patients that he likely would have fallen into a field of what may have been considered holistic practitioners, right? And quite frankly, today we have many holistic types of practitioners. Some are regulated health professionals, some are not. Obviously, at that time, he was not. But D.D. Palmer, had come from a field of magnetic healing, and of course, in Davenport, Iowa, Harvey Lillard became the first patient after becoming deaf, after recalling an incident where he snapped something in his spine, and then for 17 years could not hear. D.D. Palmer, having studied anatomy, being interested in the body, working with Harvey Lillard, assessed this person and assessed that if the physical structure of his spinal column had somehow interfered with function of hearing, that restoring normal alignment and normal mobility to whatever was distorted would give that person, that first patient, an opportunity to heal himself. And sure enough, D.D. Palmer palpated the spine, adjusted what he identified were the subluxations, the restrictions, the misalignments, quite frankly. I forget what he called them at the time because this was the first ever patient. That's, obviously our textbooks came thereafter, but worked on Harvey Lillard 3 times, and sure enough, Harvey Lillard could once again hear. So we also have that poster in our office. And we remind patients that then by a natural sequence of events, every deaf person flocked to D.D. Palmer, thinking you have the cure for deafness. And not another person who was deaf had their hearing restored. But they noticed things like their hearts functioning better, right? That their allergic responses going down. And pretty quickly, D.D. Palmer realized and put it on the books, hey, this is not a treatment for any one thing, right? This is about removing interference to best enable the body to heal itself of whatever is going on. quite frankly. And whatever's going on is nothing that is being treated. I mean, certainly if somebody shows up saying, treat my hearing issue, right? Or my father shows up saying, treat my foot, right? But the person leaves with a whole different outcome. There's no treatment, right? You can't treat something that you know doesn't exist or isn't connected with the actual person's expression. So very quickly, chiropractic developed into a separate and distinct field, not treating any one condition, because we know that medicine is the diagnosis and treatment of disease. And D.D. Palmer therefore went down a path and founded the Palmer College, and then B.J. Palmer, his son, after whom I was named, took the lead on the Palmer College to have all 50 states become licensed as a separate and distinct profession, because no one was treating anything, right? These new doctors were working with the spine to support health of the nervous system so the body could express itself as best as it possibly could. And that was in the late 1800s, but it took until 1976 for the final state in America to actually have proper licensure as chiropractors. That was 1 year after I was born. So really we're going through the first generation of our lives where chiropractic was licensed in all 50 states and all the provinces of Canada. Realistically, we only have that luxury in about half of the countries around the world. So there's still a lot of work to do. But chiropractic was always founded on the basis of eliminating interference so the body could heal itself, whether the doctor knew of a condition or not.
Pretty awesome. And as we both know, chiropractic's faced challenges in this growth since the 1800s and has challenges today. So how would you describe some of the past challenges and the challenges that we're facing currently?
Certainly, when I think back, and when I think back to the chiropractors who really had to stand up for our rights to practice today, and actually become incarcerated because they were charged with practicing medicine without a license. Here in the office, we have a pastel painting of the bell tower at Life University that you know well, in which there are 700 names at the base of the bell tower who are chiropractors throughout the years who actually went to jail, right? Or were prosecuted and persecuted for practicing medicine, even though for 100 years we've said this is not medicine. In many of those early days, to get those states licensed, and even there are chiropractors at the base of the bell tower at Life University. Life University, for those who are listening but don't know, that's the world's largest single campus of chiropractic, right? That's where I graduated. That's where I'm still very involved today. Life is 50 years old next year. So at the base of that bell tower, it recognized these chiropractors that faced massive struggles, right? To the point that they actually were charged, some imprisoned. Many did not leave. They did not back down because they knew that what they were doing was right. It was never medicine from the get-go. Never was medicine, never was intended to be medicine, never would become medicine, right? So sure enough, I can't even imagine what those struggles were like, but I know that, we're still dealing with, there's maybe a handful of chiropractors alive today who are still part of that group. Out of those 700 people at the base of the bell tower, I had the opportunity to drive 11 of them around when I was in school in chiropractic college when that bell tower was revealed. And some of them may still be here, but I think the youngest one was Dr. Nasser, who was there when Louisiana got licensed in 1976. So I cannot even imagine the challenges that they went through, but obviously that was done so that we would be our own separate and distinct health profession, right? And of course, that was different in any other part of the world. I think the challenges that we have now would largely be a gross misunderstanding of what chiropractic is, who we can support. There's a gross misunderstanding of the science and the art of chiropractic. I don't think anybody misunderstands today that chiropractors may have a different philosophy, but I will say one of the challenges that I face is that in the world of TikTok and Instagram and YouTube, which we're probably on,
yeah,
there are bone setters all over the world, and there have always been bone setters. Some are good, some are not. Most I would never let touch me. So I think there's a large misunderstanding in the population today of just how scientific and precise chiropractic is. You and I know that, going through school, when I was at Life University, we learned 12 methods of chiropractic. But I always tell patients that I think on again, according to the books, there's nearly 100 documented different techniques and methods to work with the patient and determine how do I analyze this person, and how do we adjust them, and how do we know we made the proper correction so their body can heal itself as best as possible. And I think one of the challenges today, Justine, is because there's so much clickable content out there. I don't consider this clickable content. I consider this the real deal. But there's so much clickable content of goofy adjustments and non-adjustments and click-worthy adjustments, and I would even call some adjustments, right? Because we're just really just bone setting. And that's not being critical of my colleagues who may practice a different method of me. I'm talking about literally the presentation that chiropractic is something that's simple, that it's easy, that it always has to have that audible release, and it's always based on relieving some type of pain. Because there's so much more to chiropractic, and I do think it is tough for chiropractors that take a very scientific approach on things. The public understanding what chiropractic is can make it a little more tough for a chiropractor who like you wants to practice some spinal rehabilitative home care, right? Someone who might use a drop table, an arthrostim, an activator. And I do fear that there are some patients that think they might have tried all methods of chiropractic, but they haven't, right? So I think we need to work harder to ensure that the public understands that there's numerous approaches in chiropractic. The principle is always the same, to let the body heal itself. But I always learned this, and this is also growing up as a chiropractic kid, that if one method didn't work, right, we would never question that principle, but we might change the application, right, or try a different method of realignment. And I think the better we can do that to support the chiropractic community, the more types of chiropractors we have, the more diversity that we have, and I think we can overcome some of that click-worthy stuff that people think is so simple that you probably faced in your own practice as well in the last few years.
Absolutely. It's all some of it's just about selling videos, getting as many cracks or audible releases instead of about curve correction and releasing that interference. And that's certainly as health healers and chiropractors, whether we're with Max Living or we're just focusing on prevention rather than just focusing on the disease or the acute problem. There is that variety of chiropractors. And yes, you might come in with an acute condition, but our goal for the two of us is looking at the long-term health, making one change after another to be a better version of ourselves. So that's pretty amazing. Now, who would you say are some of your top leaders and chiropractors, people that have motivated and changed your life? If you had to name 3 people and why that really made a difference in your life and affected how you live your life and how you practice as a doctor, who would be those 3 people and why?
All right, so that's a little different question than I thought you were going to ask me. I was earlier thinking about, just leaders in the profession, right? And I do think that, probably throughout the years within our profession, we have sometimes gotten into a little bit too much of a particular focus on a person, right? And certainly I know that, chiropractic for many years was criticized as being a little cultish with some of the seminars held by Sid Williams, who's right here.
Somewhere.
Yeah. Jim Parker, who's this icon, right? Because he had 18 clinics, built a chiropractic school, thousands of people go to his seminar, right? But I was actually thinking just earlier this week that I think it's good that we've been able to move away from this single person iconic type of leader, right? Because we're obviously a much more robust profession today than we were when we needed the individual characters to lead the profession, right? So therefore, I was thinking kind of about the generation of chiropractors who served as single individual leaders. But now when you ask about me, right, who actually impacted me, well, there's no question that obviously I would say my father, right? Because my father always held steadfast to the principle that the body would heal. I remember, for instance, and this is not so much about as me being a chiropractor, but this is more me understanding chiropractic. I remember when I was in school, I dislocated my shoulder real bad. Of course, when you're in school, you're a hypochondriac. You're reading everything that's going to tell you that, this could be a case for surgery and what things heal and what things don't. I remember calling my father from chiropractic. So I actually dislocated my shoulder in second quarter, right when I was time to learn how to adjust people. Great timing. And of course, it was still bugging me close to a year later. And I remember my father saying, "Let it heal. Let it heal." Right? I remember my father also having that same commitment with patients coming in, right? Who might receive 1 or 2 adjustments, expecting a miracle, right? And him telling people, "Let it heal. Healing takes time. Your body needs 2 things. It's time. It's no interference, but it's also time. And again, even today, when I work with a patient and something, maybe a person's response seems to take a little bit longer than they would wish, I always remember that line: let it heal, let it heal. Know that the body takes time to heal. We always said that it takes a year for the body to regenerate itself, minimum, maybe longer. But the reality is, my father had an impact not only in terms of how I would practice, but also just being steadfast to that principle, right? Because I do think that the chiropractors from that era, they had to face a lot, right, with states not being licensed and whatnot, in a few years before my dad started in practice. So they became tough, right? And that transcended down to me. The other chiropractors, certainly, I would definitely attribute Dr. John DeMartini for being the reason why I was actually at a seminar when I said, no, this is what I need to do. But that was more about setting academic and career goals in my life than it really was understanding chiropractic, right? And of course, I would go back to Dr. Sid, because when I was in school, it wasn't so much that he was this powerful icon, but it was really because I had the opportunity to work in his office, giving tours of the school, doing other things in the executive office as well. I saw just his steadfast commitment, and I know that this generation before us always knew that chiropractic could be very big, right? So now when I think about who I want to acknowledge now, frankly, it is people like you that are doing things in a modern sense to make sure more people can get it, right? Because we have a great truth, but it can slide so simply and so easily if we don't do everything to cherish it and then pass it on to others, right? We have something that's incredible, but again, if I wasn't sat down as a young child, right, and taught the principles about self-healing, it could be something that could be taken for granted, right? So again, I definitely have to credit the people to this day that are still doing it, that are taking all those principles that we learned and making sure that in these modern forms, people are getting it in other ways.
Absolutely. And we're blessed to have so many amazing colleagues and doctors and leaders ahead of us. One of the things I wanted to see is, the futures can be so bright. We can look at things as being negative after the COVID era, but really the future can be hopeful, can be so bright. So where would you love to see, if you had to envision the best of the best for healthcare and for chiropractic in 25 years, what would you love to see?
Where would I like to see the chiropractic profession in 25 years? I would like us to remain steadfast to our principles. Personally, and this isn't a personal preference, but I think for the purity of our profession, right? I believe we need continued advancement in our own separate and distinct science and art form and research and philosophy, right? And quite frankly, I do not believe that tremendous effort is needed on the chiropractic profession's part into healthcare services that are already in the public domain. What I would speak to is, certainly if you look at the research that is going on out of the University of New Zealand, right? New Zealand Chiropractic College. If you look at some of the research that is going on out of Life University, that is very much focused on how to best adjust the spine, how to best hold an adjustment, right? How to counter the impacts of oxidative stress, because you and I, when we adjust someone, we want that adjustment to hold as long as possible, right? In order for patients to get better and better results, it is my opinion that we need to pour more resources into research and methods and science surrounding how to deliver and maintain the best chiropractic care, as opposed to what is generally the trend of how we can integrate better with methods of practice that are in the public domain, or maybe shared by multiple other healthcare practitioners. I'll get back to what I said earlier. If a method of chiropractic doesn't work for me, I'm going to question the application. I'm going to not question the principle, but I might question the application, right? Am I holding the adjustment as long as possible, right? Am I getting the best type of adjustment that I possibly can? In our world, if a patient doesn't respond, right? Although you and I'm sure you have a Rolodex of other healthcare practitioners that you refer to. Here's the difference, Justine. My father, and I would like to say I as well, come from a generation that if a patient isn't responding or if we're not getting results, we don't give up on chiropractic. We have to reassess how we can better take care of that person to get better results based on the tools of spinal well-being and spinal alignment. I think it is all too easy for the chiropractor to say, this didn't work, you should try this. You did this didn't work, you should try that. And some of these this and that's aren't even within regulated health professions. Sometimes there are methodologies that you can get at the CNE. So I would like more resources to go into a profession that keeps us separate, keeps us distinct, right? Which is based on the expression through the nervous system, right? Minimizing interference in the nervous system, and a lot less of what seems to be the simple thing, which is integrative healthcare with numerous practitioners, and sometimes you don't know who's the chiropractor or who's anybody else. Does that make sense?
Absolutely does. And I know our philosophy is to help our bodies heal from the inside out instead of from the outside in. So, working on that inside out healing, refining and removing those subluxations. And that removal of subluxations can be done in so many different ways. You may start with a manual hand adjustment, but really they need an instrument adjustment, or vice versa, or they need a lighter touch, or they need a deeper touch. And it does take a process, just like learning to dance with your a new partner. That takes time to put effort and time to find that the fine tune the right technique for our patients.
Justine, I have to say one other thing. When I was in school, I worked on the pilot project with patients who, it was an HIV study at Life University. And we worked with patients who had been diagnosed as being HIV positive. And this was a pilot study years ago. We were going back 30 years and 25. There were patients who've been diagnosed as being HIV positive. And of course, when you're HIV positive, you're doing nothing, your CD4 counts kind of plummet. And in the pilot studies, it was designed as best as possible to be a double-blind study. So there were patients receiving an actual adjustment, and then there were patients receiving a sham adjustment. Now, I realize if anybody's listening to this, that sometimes research methodologies can be difficult to duplicate in chiropractic. But at the end of the day, the scientific method was applied as best as possible between actual adjustments and sham adjustments for the people in this pilot study. And it was found that the patients who were receiving upper cervical specific chiropractic care saw their CD4 counts improve by somewhere between 40 and 50%. The sham adjustment group saw their numbers decline by about 7% over that same period of time. The net difference was 50% increase in the CD4 counts. So of course, again, I'm pretty sure at the time we would identify that person's health crisis, not just based on whether or not they had HIV, but based on what the levels of the CD4 counts were. But the difference was, and this is where our philosophy is more vitalistic and it's not mechanistic, right? The minute this was discovered, the authors of the study said, wait a second, we can't let those people continue to decline. The research should not be, does chiropractic support the immune system? The research should be now, what's the best way to support the immune system, right? We know chiropractic works. We just need to figure out the absolute better way. Because what if there's a way to adjust those patients and see if their CD4 counts not only go by 40%, but they went up by 60%, right? To me, that's what keeps us separate and distinct. And we have a really good platform to build off of.
Definitely. Thank you so much, BJ. I know you do a lot of seminars on detox and on nutrition. BJ is in London, Ontario. So tell us a little bit about what's coming up next for you in London. I mean, that's just not that far away from Brampton. For many of you that are coming so far away, tell us how patients can reach you or family can reach you in London, Ontario, and how they can connect with some of the seminars that are coming up for you.
Yeah, our seminars have been a little bit quiet the last few years.
for challenges in the last few years, but
for a few reasons. But certainly, my website is drhardick.com, drhardick, HARDICK.com. There's a simple way to sign up for the newsletter there and specifically identify that you wish to find out when we have seminars, and then you'll always learn about those. We right now, it's been a little bit quiet because of course you couldn't get people in a room together for a couple of years without getting handcuffed, I don't think. So now that momentum is starting to build again. Some of the travel is starting to build again. But you know what? I would say it's been at a little bit different pace because some of our sites where we've hosted events and whatnot, they've changed or they do them a different way or we want to go to a different area or whatnot. So we don't have a seminar on the docket yet at this time that I can really tell your audience about. But it's something that we're passionate about and something that we'll get back to doing. And I would also, I mean, I appreciate you for doing this type of thing, right? Because in today's day, with natural, I mean, a lot of people ask us, they say, well, I didn't stop doing seminars, but we just, you know, if you're a natural health practitioner 3 years ago, you could be hung for just saying that vitamin C or zinc were helpful in combating foreign invaders to your body, you know. So non-natural healthcare practitioners went a little bit quiet the last few years. I respect that, you know, people were obviously doing their best to ensure that they could be of service to their community. But I certainly know that won't be the case long term. And I really commend people like you for continuing to keep this message in such a public forum because people absolutely need it.
They definitely do. And for all of those out there, if you have family and friends in London, Ontario, send them to Dr. BJ Hardick. You're going to get a thorough examination. You're going to get a thorough explanation of what chiropractic is and how it can serve you and your family. So thank you, BJ. Look forward to seeing you at future seminars. Your family, yourself have always been an inspiration for me. And we're so grateful for everything you do in your community and beyond. So thank you so much and look forward to seeing you soon.
The feeling is mutual. Love and appreciate you.